Thank you so much. President Norton, Board of Trustees, distinguished leadership and faculty, staff, relatives, friends, and most importantly, the 2016 graduate school graduating class of the University of Northern Colorado. I applaud you. Graduate students, in your honor, I stayed up till 3 a.m. last night finishing my speech. Nah, I didn't do that. Salvador Dali, that artistic genius and all-around wackadoo, said the following: "At the age of 6, I wanted to be a cook. At 7, I wanted to be Napoleon, and my ambition has been growing steadily ever since." Congratulations to you on your ambitions, and congratulations on fulfilling those ambitions tonight. I'm going to speak for approximately 12 minutes, and I'm going to tell you 3 stories. One about my dad, one about you, and one about a 14-year-old girl named Jasmine. I hope something I say will be helpful to you. But if in those 12 minutes you find yourself bored, just start calculating how long you have until your first student loan payment. Yep, you know it's true. In 2003, I sat where you sat. My mom, Verna, was right over there. My friends, Dennis and Jerry. But my father was not here. He had died the year before. So I want to first take a second just to acknowledge that for many of you here tonight, there are people who helped you through who cannot be here with you tonight for one reason or another, and just to say thank you to those who are here and those who cannot be here. My father, Arthur, was a professor of adult education, and he was my hero. I went to see him when he was dying, and I told him that I was going to finish my doctorate. You know, at that time, I was doing pretty much anything except writing my dissertation. Maybe some of you can relate to that. You know, like, does the cat need a bath? I'm happy to do that rather than, write another paragraph of my dissertation. And the excuses are legendary, right? But sitting there with my dad while he was dying, I was motivated to finish. My dad said to me that night, "Vicki, I know you're going to finish. I have complete faith in you. But here's what's really important. When you walk up on the stage and Dr. Darrow hands you your diploma and shakes your hand, and you shake the president's hand, and you turn around and look into the eyes of your peers and out into the world, I want you to say this to yourself: this is the first day of my education." Now, you can probably imagine my reaction, which was like, what? I didn't want to hear that. I mean, you're writing your dissertation, the last thing you want to hear is like, what? And then I'm going to have to get more education. But of course, I knew what he meant. I knew what he meant deep down. And of all the things that my dad said to me over the years, that's the one that sticks with me the most. It's the one I use every day. So I encourage you, if you get bored or you get discouraged, say to yourself, but today's the first day of my education, and open your heart and learn something new. Woody Allen quipped, "I think universal harmony is a pipe dream, and it may be more productive to focus on more modest goals, like a ban on yodeling." I loved UNC. I loved it so much that I got my master's and then I stayed for my doctorate. But your education doesn't always take you where you think it's going to take you. It can take you down some even more wonderful paths. I thought my path was clearly set for me when I graduated. I thought I was going to be like my dad and a university professor, and I was going to get tenure, and then I was going to be a full professor and never serve on another committee. And then, that was for the faculty, by the way. And that didn't turn out to be true. I've certainly taught college and university, but life had other plans. One evening, I walked into a concert of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered chorus in Denver called Harmony. All around the stage were teddy bears. They nearly filled the empty spaces between the singers and on the floor and in the risers, and I thought, teddy bears, what is that all about? And then the artistic director walked out and said, each one of those teddy bears represents a gay man in this chorus who has died of AIDS. Through the tears, I realized that although I was gay myself, I had very little understanding of my history, of my people, or the profound challenges that faced us. That night, I witnessed the extraordinary power of art to create and sustain community, to encourage healing, and enlighten audiences about issues of social justice, and my path began to curve. So I became the director of Harmony, and during my tenure with them, the state of Colorado passed something called Amendment 2, which took away some of the rights of the GLBT community. Although it was eventually struck down by the courts, it was a very dark time in the community. Some people even committed suicide in despondency. Our community won that battle, in large part because of the straight allies who stood beside us, who cried with us and fought with us for our human rights. And here's the part that's about you, graduates. When you leave here tonight, you will be the educated leaders, academics, researchers, nurses, business people, artists in your communities. In order for you to be successful in leading people, in starting a business, in working with students and colleagues, you must educate yourself about structural inequality. You must assess, acknowledge, and own where you have privilege, where you do not, and where your biases are. I'm a Caucasian, middle-class, lesbian woman. On any given day, in any given circumstance, one of those identities may be a position of power, or it may not. I navigate those identities and my power, or lack of it, in two ways, and I invite you to do the same. The first is, if you have more power or privilege than the person to whom you're speaking, or the group that you're in, you should listen more than you speak. Stephen Covey said, "Seek first to understand, then to be understood." Second, if you're in a position where your identity at that moment does not give you a lot of power or privilege, speak up, tell your truth, demand change. But remember, just as I learned in the Amendment 2 crisis, look for your movement's allies. Don't exclude, dismiss, or stereotype them. It's human to have anger about injustice, and you should have anger. But it's also been the practice of everyone from Gandhi to Gloria Steinem to Martin Luther King to look for universal humanity and good wherever it may be found, and to engage that good in those we often perceive to be our enemies in order to bend the arc of justice forward. I want to preface the final story about Jasmine with an excerpt from a poem by the Spanish poet Antonio Machado. Last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt, marvelous error, that I had a beehive here inside my heart, and the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey from my old failures. I never wanted kids. And I never much, honestly, for many years saw the point of them. I just wish they would grow up so I could have an adult conversation with them. I'm being real, that's how I felt about them, right? But then I began to wonder why so many people actually like children. Shocking, you know? And I didn't. So reminding myself, today is the first day of my education, maybe there's something that I should be learning here. I began to address my own childhood difficulties. Though much of my childhood was wonderful, I spent many years needing to work through the muck and the mire and the pain of other parts of it. And then one day, marvelous error, as the poet said. My social worker friend Dawn called me and she said, "Vicki, today I was taking home a 14-year-old green-eyed Irish beauty named Jasmine. She's one of the foster children in my caseload. She lives at the Excelsior Youth Center where she's receiving treatment. She has so much anger from trauma and abuse that she's constantly getting in fights and having to be restrained. Because yes, they still do restrain children sometimes. And in the car, Dawn said, Jasmine began singing to me in a language that I didn't understand. And I said, Jasmine, what are you singing? What is that language? And she said, I don't know. My dad used to sing it to me when I was a baby. And Dawn said, it must be Gaelic. And indeed it was. Dawn said, Vicki, will you give Jasmine voice lessons? Actually, what she did was she said, Vicki, you're going to give Jasmine voice lessons. And she hung up the phone. Because she knew how I felt, So she said, will you give her voice lessons? And Dawn said, I told Jasmine she could only work with you if she did not have to be restrained, and she stopped fighting. So I took a deep breath, and I said, yes, okay. And 9 months later, Jasmine had not been restrained, not even once. What I realized when I started working with Jasmine was that marvelous error. I loved this child. I understood her. I got her. Not her specific trauma, because of course that was not my trauma, but the core of what she was feeling, I understood. And because I had faced my own past, I could stand with her and be a comforting, inspiring presence. So I added more foster and adopted children to an adult choir I had at the time, and it became the SOAR Youth and Adult Choir, which in the 5 years since its inception has sung for over 25,000 people across the Denver metro area and helped many children through its mentoring program. And of all the artistic, social, entrepreneurial projects I've done for breast cancer and other things, this one has meant the most to me. What I thought was my greatest weakness became one of my greatest strengths. So I want to encourage you. Don't believe the stories you tell yourself about who you are. They may or may not always be true. What you perceive as a weakness now may in fact become one of your greatest strengths, if you have the courage to face the pain or difficulty that underlies that weakness. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? Asks the poet Mary Oliver. If I were sitting where you are today, knowing what I know now, I would answer the poet, I don't know, but I will find out. Stay open, trust, listen, be courageous. Today, graduates, is the first day of your education. Thank you very much.